Is there the slimmest chance that Frieza might one day no longer be a bad guy? Hey guys, MasakoX here. Now, despite a large absence from the Tournament of Power in the last few weeks, Frieza has returned to the public eye in full force with his latest antics in Dragon Ball Super Episode 108. Spoilers, by the way. His supposed teaming up with Frost was a sign that Frieza was about to betray the likes of Universe 7 and usurp all the gods present and then become the head honcho, all for the sake of gaining control of the Omniverse. However, what we got was quite different. Instead of Frost and Frieza eliminating Gohan right there and then, Frieza instead chose to teach his apprentice a very golden rule: never to trust him. Frost paid the price and just let his entire personality get the better of him. It was his desperate and deceitful manner which ultimately cost him his life at the hand of the Omni King. I said it before in my review and I will say it again. I did not see that coming. Now, despite Frieza's gesture, nobody in Universe 7 thanked him for his service. And when you think about it, Frieza did them a really huge favour because Frost had been causing all sorts of trouble for Universe 7. In fact, it was that guy who was responsible for 2 of the 3 eliminations for Universe 7 as of episode 108. First, he ganged up on Krillin, who had actually been on a decent roll up to that point, and the other when he was basically toying with Roshi and draining him almost of any energy. Out of good fortune though, Roshi was able to end his stint in the Tournament of Power on his own terms. Frost was never able to get the satisfaction of eliminating Master Roshi as well. Good. Now that we've indulged in our Frost-Frieza interaction and what would happen if they actually met each other, we can now go back to the cardinal question that we asked ourselves about Frieza's involvement in the Tournament of Power. What will his place in Super wind up being? Most people will assume that he'll just stay the same as he's always been, and that he will not develop anymore, and that he's never even developed to begin with from the first time he was in DBZ. But I think we can easily say that some people might be confusing character development with character redemption. I think the Tournament of Power is the perfect place to be seeing Frieza developing into a different character. Now, the biggest factor for this change and the reason why he has to change is quite a simple one. He's no longer an emperor. He had his empire taken away from him from the very people, the Saiyans, that he was planning to subjugate. Albeit it was a slightly delayed reaction, it took a while. In some ways, you might actually liken Frieza to Vegeta. They actually share something in common: a ruler without something to rule. Having said that though, I don't think Frieza is bitter about losing his empire. At least not anymore. Episode 108 was a crucial episode regarding his development. It gave us 2 solid examples as to why we can see Frieza changing into a different character from what we saw before. Firstly, Frieza was actually honest with Gohan. He said what he was thinking to Gohan. No sugarcoating, no hiding it, he just gave him the facts. If you hadn't seen through my scheme, I would have killed you. Secondly, he actually referred to Gohan by name. And as we've seen in recent episodes, when a character actually regards another character with their actual name, you know, with Beerus respecting Master Roshi, that's a pretty big deal. If a strong character acknowledges your existence, that means something. I'm not thinking in the slightest that Frieza is actually going to be invited to any shindigs. He's not going to be going to any birthday parties at Capsule Corporation anytime soon. Or ever. He is never going to attain that level of friendship with the main cast, but instead, I think he will ultimately end up being what many people refer to as an enemy friend or a frenemy. Now, if you think that's just like Vegeta, Piccolo, Hit, or the androids, that they're frenemies, they don't count because they are either redeemed heroes or they've actually become friends, proper friends. If you absolutely wish to label Frieza something, then you might actually in the fullness of time be able to consider him an anti-hero. Why? Because I think deep down he actually respects his monkeys. I mean, come on, after being defeated by them 3 times, you gotta actually gain a little bit of respect. I mean, hell, in the latest episode, he was even kind of mentoring Gohan. And was his method of training all that different from the way Piccolo treated Gohan right at the beginning of Dragon Ball Z? Because remember, Piccolo wasn't nice to Gohan right at the beginning. He was a tough teacher. And yes, whatever Frieza's intentions are, they are purely selfish. He is a complete and utter sociopath. But in a way, so is Goku. Goku was extremely lucky to have been raised by someone who was actually quite reasonable, Grandpa Gohan. Who's to say what would have happened if Goku ended up being raised by someone really malevolent? I think that the present arc has shown us that the way that we actually perceive different characters depends on what side they're on. Now that Frieza's actually fighting for our side, we don't know what to think anymore. We have been taught from a very young age to view Frieza as a straight up bad guy. And I think Frieza will always have a very curious relationship with the Saiyan race. You know, the actual race that he actually tried to bring to the brink of extinction, but didn't quite do. But in an ironic twist of fate, it was the Saiyans that indeed completely destroyed him. But after each outcome, both parties end up being stronger as a result. They actually kind of rely on each other, and we're still not quite sure who's the second strongest mortal in Universe 7. Is it Frieza or Vegeta? It keeps changing. That level of ambiguity is enticing for us as an audience. And if you're still thinking that Frieza has not changed since the very first episode he was in, then I'm afraid to say that he has. If you actually take yourself back to episode 44 of DBZ, you would have seen a Frieza who would have never gotten his hands dirty. Over the fullness of time, Frieza began to take things into his own hands, and you know what? I think very slowly but surely, he came to enjoying a little round of fisticuffs here and there. Nowadays, I think he values training in some way. For all of his life prior to Namek, he didn't see the need to train because he was strong enough as it is. He had a power level of 530,000, much stronger than anyone else in the entire galaxy, so what was the point? You just need to exercise your little finger just to do an occasional death beam to get the point across, or maybe destroy the occasional planet. Frieza has actually realized something. He is, in actual fact, a warrior, which again, ironically enough, is a trait that he shares with his most mortal enemies. And when you actually go back to the point that Frieza was actually kind of mentoring Gohan, he then brought up a valid point, something that the Saiyan was not doing, commenting on how Gohan never transformed or used his full potential right from the start. In some ways, it could actually be quite useful to have Frieza around in times like this, but to make sure that he can actually be effective and, not trying to kill people, he needs to have his cruel intentions directed somewhere else. Something that isn't going to endanger the folks of Universe 7 every single day. So I think that the prospect of becoming a god of destruction is a very enticing way of keeping Frieza at bay. I reckon that we can actually reach a point between Frieza, Goku and Vegeta that they can actually sit down in a room and try not to beat each other up. Oh, mark my words, they will never be friendly towards each other. But I think if there was a greater threat coming their way, then they would actually join forces and be somewhat effective as a team. Whilst, granted, they might occasionally punch each other in the face. Do you want another little bit of evidence for this? Take a look at Frieza's pose in the 9th ending to Dragon Ball Super, Haruka. In this shot, take a look at Frieza. He does not look shifty or devious at all. He seems to me quite content, comfortable even. That is the look of a straight up anti-hero. That is an anti-hero pose. I think at this point he's actually enjoying fighting alongside these Universe 7 folk. This newfound contentment can actually justify his behavior towards Gohan in Dragon Ball Super episode 108. He was relatively fair with him. He even actually put faith in him, putting faith in a monkey. Who would have seen that coming? He trusted that Gohan would cotton onto his scheme in tricking Frost, and that the whole subject and scenario would pay off, and it did. From that little exercise, I think Frieza might have even gained an ounce of respect for Gohan. And remember, he hadn't shown any kind of respect to Gohan up until that point. And remember, up until now, we weren't entirely sure whether Frieza actually bothered to learn the names of the Z-Fighters other than Goku and Vegeta. But now, we know that at least he's capable of learning it, or shows some kind of inclination to learning them. Again, I don't think he's going to be considering anybody in Universe 7 as a friend. More like useful minions, like back in the day with Zarbon, Dodoria and Ginyu. So in a way, it could be some newfound, weird and quite twisted fondness towards them. And that is why I wasn't too fussed about Frost meeting Frieza. You think they might be two peas in a pod, but they're actually not. And yes, Frieza did team up with Frost, who is a compulsive liar. But at the end of the day, when Frost proved to not be useful anymore, Frieza was honest about his feelings and then just ejected him out of the ring. Frieza gave us a masterclass about how you could trick someone whilst also being honest with them. And I think this is the part of the respect that Frieza and the Saiyans have for each other. We as an audience were still going, oh, Frieza's gonna be disqualified because he killed someone and oh, he did a bad thing. Oh no, turns out we were played. Frieza has no intention of killing anyone in this tournament. He's not that stupid. And I think he also has a respect for strength. It's a language that he can speak, especially now, since he's training a lot more than he used to. And quite honestly, I don't think that relationship between him and Frost was actually going to go anywhere else because Frost does not deal in strength. He is a relative weakling, and that won't do for Frieza. So to sum this all up, Can you redeem Frieza in Super whilst also making sure what makes him him is left intact? No and yes. No if you're expecting a redemption in the traditional sense, and yes if you're expecting a redemption that will actually result in some kind of weird alliance between him and the protagonists. But Masako, how can you be so sure that Frieza won't go on a killing spree once Universe 7 turns out okay, and every single universe is wished back by the Super Dragon Balls? Because, okay, that's a boring ending that could possibly happen. How would he be able to entertain himself now that he's alive and not got an empire? Well, that's easy. I think Frieza is fully aware that if Goku and Vegeta were to gang up on him, he would easily be overpowered. The only way to stop that from happening is to become a god. Especially when he's actually witnessed the upcoming fight between Jiren and Goku, because I'm pretty sure that Frieza's going to be, oh my, that is something I need. I think he'll end up venturing towards somebody else's universe, become someone else's problem. I don't think Universe 7 and Beerus are going to mind that too much. Who specifically though? Kitella and Sidra. Why? He's got some unfinished business with them. Remember episode 95? When Kitella and Sidra were planning to assassinate Frieza and Goku? That score needs to be settled someday. Also for Frieza, Goku and Vegeta are his constant. He will always have the excuse to get stronger and then one day defeat the pair. However, the Tournament of Power has shown that Frieza might actually prefer to be chasing the rabbit instead of actually catching it. These days, now that Frieza doesn't have an empire, his only purpose is to seek out revenge, but what happens when that's all over and done with and he's got his revenge? Then what? We might end up with a depressed Joker situation from all the stories where the Joker ultimately killed Batman. There's nothing to strive for anymore, no reason for living. Long story short, there is a place for Frieza to go after the Tournament of Power, and that is up in the heavens, ironically. In time, he actually might begin to enjoy his new life. He could enjoy it so much that he might actually stop caring for revenge, even though he might not openly admit it. If he could thrive in an environment where he's actually supposed to strike fear in the hearts of men as a role of god of destruction, then I think we could see Frieza develop even faster. He will be a lot calmer and he might actually end up possibly liking Goku in some way, like a true frenemy. I think that that's the best course of action, because if the writers don't take that course of action, then they run the risk of Frieza becoming a broken record. So what do you guys think? Do you think Frieza could develop in some other way? Do you think he'll actually end up liking Goku one of these days? Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Until the next one, be sure to like and subscribe. Catch you later!